this morning at 10. And then we have a couple of police stations to visit to follow up on the status of certain dockets. But yeah, flying in and then getting the news yesterday of the assassination of Lifman came as quite a shock.
Tell us, who was Mark Lifman?
I first met Mark about 2 decades ago. He was the focus of a Scorpion investigation, and the Scorpions were investigating him for a number of cases. But what they were really trying to do was to tie him to the underworld, the various mafias that were operating down in Cape Town. They were trying to link him as being the person who most probably laundered a lot of the ill-gotten gains of these particular syndicates. The Scorpions, who investigated, as we all know, complex financial crimes, actually were investigating him on a child molestation case, which was very unusual for the Scorpions. And he got bail of about 200,000 Rand back then. And we could see what the Scorpions were trying to do was to use that case to get momentum, to most probably get him to turn state witness against some of the people that he was involved with. But it didn't work. And that case collapsed, and he continued. And his good friends, Yuri the Russian, was later assassinated, followed very closely by Cyril Beaker, who was very, very well known in the Cape Town underworld, both very close associates of Mark Lifman. And he then just seemed to take a far more broader public role in the Cape Town underworld, running security companies, running massive property companies that he invested money in on the Atlantic seaboard. He had a retail clothing business. He got involved in a lot of things, but he was never, ever far from controversy. And despite his denials over the years of not being linked to the underworld, every time something happened, there seemed to be some or other linkage to him. The state could just never tie it up definitively. And perhaps that was what was going to happen during this trial. One must remember his trial was starting today in respect of his purported involvement in the so-called assassination of the world steroid king, Weinstein. So today was going to be a very important day in the Cape Town underworld as the trial was set to get underway, and here he gets assassinated a day before.
Sure. Chad, just before we carry on, I just need to give some information to the listeners, and it would be a good time now because most of them are on now, listening to you. Môre gaan daar wel 'n uitsending wees van Stroom op. Hy gaan net nie dieselfde wees as elke oggend nie, want ek gaan in Pretoria wees. Ons sal verskeie gesprekke hê, kyk wat se gesprekke ons kan hê. Ons gaan ons Amerikaanse gesprek hê en 'n klompie ander gesprekke, maar ek is môre in Pretoria om die Bella optog te volg en vir julle van daar af 'n bietjie verslag te lewer, net sodat julle weet ons het 'n normale uitsending môre, 'n normale tyd uitsending, maar dat hy so 'n bietjie anders gaan lyk. Chad, talking about Mark Lifman in the underworld, I see there's a question if Mark Lifman was instrumental in the death of Cyril Beaker.
So we don't know what happened in terms of their relationship. We know that Mark and Cyril were exceptionally close at a stage, as was Mark exceptionally close to Yuri Ludsky, who was assassinated in a hail of bullets in Milnerton, and sadly his toddler daughter was also killed in that particular hit. These hits now date back 15 years, and during that time it seems that Lifman has entrenched himself within the Cape Town underworld. He's been linked to a lot of nefarious characters, a lot of people who've been the focus of multiple investigations over the last 3 decades. Most notably, he's linked to Jerome Donkey Boyson, who allegedly heads up one of the biggest gangs on the Cape Flats. But there was a issue between Mark and Jerome's brother, Colin Boyson. Then, of course, there's the Stansfield crew, and there's linkages there. And then Nafis Modak was very public about his disdain for Mark Lifman. He, in fact, blames Mark Lifman for the death of Cyril Beaker. So the politics that are playing out in the Cape Flats at the moment, and that have been playing out for the last couple of years, is pretty intense. And I think that this death is really going to shake things up. He was 57. He's been in the game for a long time. He was the dapper Don, if one could call him that. He was exceptionally well-spoken, well put together, lovely home in Fresno, had all these legitimate businesses around him, but it was always seemed to be drawn to the underworld, much the same as one would see a moth being drawn to the light. And if one spoke about the security industry and the protection and extortion rackets, etc., in the Cape Town City Bowl, Lifman's name always popped up.
I see they caught two guys in regard of his death. I can't find the story where I saw it earlier this morning. So I'm gonna rely on you to just maybe give us information if you have about that.
So the news we got yesterday was that the hit took place just after midday at a car park in George. He had apparently gone to George to play golf. It was very strange that he wasn't moving with his bodyguards. He normally had about a minimum of 5 bodyguards with him. He wasn't driving one of his more well-known luxury vehicles. He was in a Raptor at the time. He must have been either exiting the vehicle or entering the vehicle at the time that he was assassinated. The suspects were circulated on local security channels as well as the police channels. The vehicle was identified as being a VW. A chase ensued. And with this technology we have around South Africa, which is brilliant, the CCTV monitoring that we have on roads, with license plate recognition, vehicle recognition, they were picked up driving through towards Uniondale. And the police, together with the local security company, set up a blockade or a roadblock, and they were able to successfully